Alderman Sorrentino,
Here.
Alderman Jacob,
Here.
Alderman Woods,
Here.
Alderman Sizmarsky,
Here.
Alderman Roy Wesley, Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Catalano,
Here.
Alderman Messina.
Here.
And we have a quorum. All right, next on the agenda is I need an approval of the minutes of the meeting on August 13th, 2020, Public Health, Safety, Judiciary, and Ethics Committee. I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Don't get excited. It's just 1 second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Minutes stick. All right, we're going to have a report and a recommendation. We're going to have a discussion by our Chief Vesta about the intersection options at Potter and Spruce. Hello, Chief.
Hello, sir.
You look wonderful.
Thanks. I cleaned up today. All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So tonight, we're here to talk a little bit further about the intersection of Potter and Spruce. If you remember, over last winter, we came here because we were having several incidents of cars that had slid through on, primarily before the road was salted, you know, that first half inch or whatever of snow. But we had 4 incidents, I believe, just over a year period. And those incidents were cars going eastbound on Potter, approaching Spruce. And what had happened is, as they rolled through this, what used to be a yield sign here, we had 3 or 4 cars that made it into the front lawn. And then the last incident in January last year, they actually ended up in the driveway and striking one of the vehicles in the driveway. So based on that, we did a couple things last year. We added the additional warning curve signs, both on Potter and then northbound on Spruce. And we added the stop sign at that intersection. So what we had kind of left that with is we were going to come back after some further examination this summer and discuss if there's some other options that might need to be done over there. Obviously, we haven't had any snow, but we still do continue to have issues with cars, rolling through there, and the concerns are about this winter, even with the stop sign there, cars sliding through the intersection into the front lawn or near the house. So based on council direction, we're coming back to you with some further options. We did talk to Robinson Engineering, who did the previous study. So a couple of things. One thing is the stop ahead sign gets a little bit close to the current stop sign, so we're going to work with Public Works staff. We'll get that moved back. I think the recommendation was 350 feet back or 250 back before the sign, so we'll follow their recommendation of that. One of the issues is in the parkway here, there's a manhole right in the middle. So we had originally possibly discussed some type of raised bed with some concrete blocks and whatever. The problem is if we raise that bed and not make that accessible for Public Works, or if they do have to go in there and do work, it's going to cost a lot to tear it out and redo. The other option that was presented was some type of raised planter in the front lawn, maybe with some boulders, whatever. We had even discussed with the resident possibly some type of cost share that could happen to get it initially put in, and then he would take it over at that point. Him and his wife are not interested in taking up a significant portion of their front lawn for that. So the other option was that would fit within the MUTCD guidelines according to the engineer is to put about 3 to 4 boulders right in this parkway, ones that are not so massive that they're outside the guidelines, but that would stop any cars that are rolling through. The cars that have come through when there's been, slippery conditions, it's not like they're coming through at 60 miles an hour and, we're completely out of control, but if there were some type of barrier here, it would probably stop them and prevent them from going in the front yard. So I was out and met with the resident too, and I thought he was actually going to be here tonight. But that's kind of where we're leaning towards a recommendation is to put those 3 to 4 boulders in the parkway, probably $600 to $800, and then the homeowners association takes care of the parkway, so they would continue with the trimming and maintenance around those boulders. I think there's a question.
Randy?
So I know Alderman Jacob and I have been working on this, and yeah, you're spot on. I know we thought the stop sign would help. It has helped a little bit. But it is very deceiving because that curve is deceiving. I know I've even been guilty of kind of like, whoa, oh my God, there's a stop sign. So I appreciate you moving that back a little bit. And I would like to make a motion for the city to put in the 3 to 4 boulders in the parkway. And that would be a formal motion.
Second.
Before we do decide, I don't know if there was 2 other options that the resident had brought up. I don't know if we want to take action on this motion, but that would be unrelated to this that we want to discuss further. I don't know what the chairman wants to do.
Can we discuss this further and then come back to the motion in the second, please?
And this will be short, but he brought up 2 things that I wanted to make sure to share with council. One was, he had discussed, what's the possibility of a speed hump out there? Well, per the policy and the engineering guidelines, a speed bump has to be at least 150 feet away from any stop sign, or 200 feet from any intersection. That takes it all the way back here. So even if you had one there, it's enough of a distance that if a car is not going to obey the stop sign, it's not going to stop them from that. The other thing that he had talked about, and I know some towns have done it, is the installation of some type of LED solar sign. 2 things with that is, one, it's about $1,500 to $2,000, depending on the model. We would have to make sure it's compatible with the new types of signs that are out there and would fit into those. And then you're probably going to be setting a precedent that there's going to be many other areas of town that want that type of light. So just things to consider and something that came up in my discussion with the resident. That's all.
I have a question. Yes, I'll be recognized. The picture, if you can go back to that driveway, Chief. You had mentioned at one point a car made it up to the driveway and scraped the vehicle.
Yeah, right there.
So the boulders that we're talking about have no bearing on the driveway.
So that car, actually, all the cars that have slid into this front lawn have all done so right in this area. None of them entered from the roadway. So that car actually slid here and kind of as he was curving. So none of them have entered from the drive, and because of the snow, we were able to tell where they entered off the roadway from.
Perfect. Alderman Sismarski.
Yeah, Chief, I have a question. First, it's a 2-part question, I'm sorry. Mask was in the way. How lit is that corner?
I
mean,
don't recall off the
street
top of my
light, does
head.
it light up the whole corner? Do people see that sign? Are they missing it for a reason, or?
I think there's 2 parts to it. One is that area obviously is used as access to 83 for a lot of people. Not that there aren't a lot of residents that go that way, but just impatience and probably many years of there never being a stop sign there. You know, even though we'll go out there and sit out there, it still takes a while to change some of those behaviors.
Second part is, what is the stop, I'm sorry, is that right?
Finish up.
I had 2-part. What does it stop us from putting a photo enforcement there? It's kind of like the stop red light enforcement.
Chief.
There's no photo enforcement for stop signs in the state.
I mean, obviously, it's for pedestrian, I'm on the judiciary board also, and to me, that would be pedestrian safety for a sidewalk. If they're coming across that guy's lawn, hitting his car in the driveway, that's a pedestrian sidewalk. So I have to look at both sides, and you have to understand that they're sliding across a driveway and a sidewalk. So,
Yeah, and I think that's why the recommendation would be is to do it right in here, that's where they're leaving the roadway. All 4 cars that have left the roadway in the last several years have been right here. They weren't on the driveway, so that would prevent if someone was walking on the sidewalk. And again, they're not coming off at 80 miles an hour, but they've slid off the roadway, and if you had a little bit more barrier here, it's going to stop the cars before it gets to the house.
okay, thanks.
Peter wanted to comment on the chief's remarks. Mr. Alderman Jacob?
Well, I also had questions.
Well, we'll get carried away, okay?
Well, I was going to talk about the lights. There is decorative lighting there, so they're not real bright. Because townhouses have them, or the homes, well, the city has them on the Potter, and then the townhouse development and the home development has decorative street lights there. My next thing is the car actually was totaled, so it wasn't just scratched. It was actually totaled. I mean, he had to get a
Big
brand new,
difference.
brand new car. And like the chief said, it always is in that area he's talking. All the pictures, it's always been in that area. And just driving that way, coming home that way, sometimes there are still people that just drive. I don't know if they're always residents that just are so used to no stop sign being there that they forget about it, or it's just drive-throughs, they just don't see the stop sign, they drive right through it.
Yeah, I don't know if they necessarily don't see it. I think it's more of a habit, and I know our officers have sat out there. But when I was out talking to the resident, in his front lawn there, there's people that don't stop all the way there. So that'll be continued to be an enforcement area for us to stop people out there, so.
Alderman Catalano.
Yeah, so the land on the west, who owns that?
In here?
Yeah.
Over here is Bensonville Park District.
Okay. So my issue is if we put an island or a divider and divide the two lanes and put a median in the middle, I think maybe that would address some of the problems.
Right. So,
If, well, you can
Are
make
you
it wide.
talking here?
yeah.
Yeah, all the way down in front of the house, all the way, continue all the way down.
Like Jersey Wall, there's no room for it.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, and I'm not the public works guy, I have no expertise in road construction, but my guess is that would be a more than $100,000 proposal to fix the problem, which probably would address the problem, but I think you'd have to widen, this would all have to be widened, sidewalks moved, and significant more where I'm hopeful that this would solve the problem, just addressing it in the parkway.
I'm going to go to Alderman Messina,
Yeah.
the mayor, and Mr. Alderman.
So, no,
Woods.
Alderman Catalano, like, talked to me about that, and I thought it was I thought it was a good idea, but
It'll
I know
work,
we have a
yes.
lift station, actually, right there, before the Bensonville Park District, right there.
There's the lift station.
So, to his point, I know, like, when I come off of Second to 83, there's an island, like a, what is it, triangle? Pork chop. Yeah, pork chop, there you go, called the pork chop. So, I can't imagine that would cost $100,000, but would it, I guess it would be if we had to meet certain IDOT standards. Because that, to me, would fix it, like putting boulders, and I know I made a motion for it, but thinking about it, smashing someone's car, I mean, I know, I drive that almost every day. I know the chief mentioned, sometimes it's just, I'm so focused on the curve that I'm not even thinking about the stop signs. I'm like, oh, and so I really think it's kind of twofold, whereas if that pork chop was there, it might, like, it forces me every time, like, either I'm going right into Route 83 or I'm going to slow down and turn on that before that pork chop hits me.
We're going to hear from Director Lang on this issue, and then we'll come back to the questions between the mayor and Mr. Alderman.
What
Woods.
about Jersey
Thank you, Chairman.
Wall?
One issue with installing that kind of median in the center of the lane with the geometry that's there now is the turn radius for emergency vehicles like fire trucks. In order to kind of, if you were to widen out a right turn lane there, I mean, you're running into issues obviously with our lift station, which is critical infrastructure that isn't necessarily that easy to be moved, and then you're going to have to put in new sub-base for the road, new concrete, new curb. It does get very costly very quickly.
Mayor.
Just so everybody understands, on the opposite end of Potter and Central, we have the same thing happening over there. So that resident mailbox used to get knocked off pretty regularly. That has been remedied with a simple solution. There's no stop sign. No stop sign was ever put, but there was a couple boulders put on each side of the driveway, and for the last probably 20 years, nobody's knocked down the mailbox anymore.
Yeah,
So
correct, last year.
and that's the exact same thing.
Any other questions besides Alderman Woods, who's going next? Then you, Alderman Sismarski. Go ahead, Alderman Woods.
Wow.
Thank you. So, have we looked into either bollards or guardrail there in place of rocks? And the only reason I asked to look at that is because depending on the size of the boulder could be used to launch the car. The difference in this location versus the other one, I think, is the ability to gain speed and you're open. So that's why those cars are traveling so fast and came in and wiped out that car. So if that's the case, depending on the size of the boulder could, if they're put in big enough, I guess that's gonna stop the car. But if they're not big enough, they're gonna launch the car.
Yeah, the engineer did give some previous guidance on that, and they recommended against a guardrail in that location. There's a lack of physical length to install an appropriate crash-worthy end section to guardrails, is what their recommendation was. It would create a liability for the city if
Oh,
installed.
I see, right, because of the short distance, you wouldn't have enough to, all right, got it. And-
Probably even the north, there has to be a crash-worthy end put in northbound
On both
too,
sides.
if they went off the roadway there, so.
And how about if we looked at bollards there, spaced like 3 feet apart?
Are you talking over here?
Yeah,
It wasn't raised as an option.
Put lights in them too if you wanted to.
I mean, they use them they're used all over, right, parking lots, malls, if that's an option. I'm just offering alternatives, not knowing if the boulders are the size, if they're actually gonna
Yeah. Well,
solve, or could they create a problem?
can I comment on that?
I think the landscape boulders were probably chosen just more as an aesthetic option as opposed to the bollards to take the residents' concerns into consideration.
Yep.
Alderman Messina?
Yeah, he's, the resident, which I'm surprised couldn't make it, but yeah, I would think it'd be a big no. I mean, it's a pretty nice house, and I think he wants to minimize what's on the front lawn. I think it's part of the frustration. So the boulders are kind of a happy medium. And then one thing I didn't see was the flashing stop sign, which I know I'd mentioned before, but part of what I thought about, and I guess, is the interference with those that are on, what is that street, that back up to it.
On
or in the
Arbor, yeah.
Areas, yeah, Arbor Lane, and what that might do, but
Well,
You always see it from.
again, you could do incremental here and put the boulders in, and then if we feel we need to add additional lighting to the stop sign down the road, we can always come back. But what this would probably do is address the immediate need of, if we still continue to have some cars slide and get to that point, then maybe we do need to add something else, but this would prevent them from going up into his yard.
All right, Alderman Jacob, you have the privilege of asking the last question. in this
Oh,
matter,
well, thank you.
Because then we're going to the voting. Go ahead.
I was going to mention too, eventually too, Alderman Messina and I have been talking to the Bensonville Park District, and they already have a grant for a playground in that, in the field over there. So my guess is eventually we may have to put a slow children signs there as well, or even reduce speed because of the park. I'm not sure what they do with parks, would
Does
they?
it have anything to do with the boulders right now?
Well, yeah, because it's going to slow people down too with the stop
Well,
sign.
I will talk briefly about the slow children playing and the deaf child playing, is they highly recommend about not putting any of those in anymore. That is a 20-mile-an-hour zone. I don't see it being recommended to go down to 15, but, and actually when the park district installs their park, they might want to consider some type of fencing along here.
Yeah, and they were going to put fencing.
Yeah, that might be more of the concern, and,
Okay.
and, certainly on the patrol side, we'll continue to be active out there too.
Thank you, Chief. Great job, Alderman. Director Lane, good job. If I recall, we have a motion by Alderman Messina to go with the boulders. That was seconded by Alderman Jacob. So we're going to do a little roll call on that, please.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes,
Alderman Sizmarsky?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene
Yes.
Wesley?
Should have put a Jersey wall in.
And that passes. And I don't want to seem remiss on Alderman Sismarski's idea of photo enforcement. So Alderman Lang, if you could look into the high lifeguard chairs that they have on the beach and get Mike a Polaroid, he's going to sit there and take photos for us. Appreciate that, Alderman Sismarski.
No, that's not.
All right, that motion passed. Oh, not Alderman Lang, Director Lang. I'll get it
Lane
straight.
was, Jersey wall was my concept for Director Lane.
All right, that passed. Let's see what else we got left. Items to be considered at future meetings. Anything? Well, with that then, I'll look for a, in a second, for the
Second.
adjournment.
Second.
Gentlemen, and Alderman Lane, we are adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're done, we're adjourned.
Could you,
Warm handoff to the Public Works Committee.
No, it's, what's?
Yeah, we're gonna shift gears and we moved up the Finance and Administration Committee.
oh, I
All
want,
right.
Yeah. So this will be quick. Let the minute taker reflect the same people are here. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for August 13, 2020. Any questions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, report and recommendation, hotel motel tax, OTC update. Mr. Wilson, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may recall, we hired Azavar to do a tax audit for us about a year ago. And one of the things that they identified during the hotel motel tax audit was the OTC, the online booking sites. There's a little bit of a tax loophole in there, in that the hotels are remitting to us what they're being paid, which is what they're supposed to do. But when the online booking site resells the room for a higher rate than they paid the hotel, we're not getting the tax on that portion. So the room would actually be rented for, say, $100, so we should get $5 in tax. But if they purchased it from the hotel at a discount rate of $80, we're only getting the $4. So we're trying to close that loophole and pick up the tax for what the room was ultimately rented for, not just what it was purchased for in some bulk online sale transaction. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is just close the tax loophole for the online booking sites versus the bookings directly through the hotels themselves.
Let's see, Alderman Wesley.
Were you looking for a policy change or?
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, we have the proper ordinance. We have to change the code to amend it to allow for us to collect from the online booking sites. Azavar did provide that to us. And then they also have an online portal for those companies to remit those taxes through, because they already have a relationship with them through other tax audits that they've done. So yes, we would be preparing that and bringing that to council to update the city code accordingly to be able to capture those monies, those taxes.
So I'll make a motion to move forward.
Give direction to update.
Right, give directions for them to go forward.
All right, do we have a second?
second.
Okay. Any other questions? Mayor?
Brad, I didn't see it here, but I meant to ask you. I take it there's a fee for Azavar?
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, it's the same contingency fee that they have for any other revenue stream that they find. I believe it's either 40 or 45% for 30 months that they get, and then it drops off, and then we collect 100% of it. So we still collect 100% up front, and then we remit that back to them. You probably see on a list of bills every month, it says like contingency fee,
Right.
Comcast or ComEd, whatever. So it'd be a similar relationship as that, exact same deal.
Any other questions? There being none?
You don't need one.
All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Do you have your direction?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next items to be considered at future meetings, bike path tip, October 8th, banking RFP, October 22nd. Is there anything that anybody else would like? Please, oh, look at all the hands. Mr. Jacob?
I think this would go on this committee. I wanted to bring up, we had talked about stopping the water bills, shutting off the water till February because of COVID. But I've heard of several people that have investment properties where their tenants are not paying the water bill or the rent, and thus they're going to eventually have to be paying both eventually. So I'd like to talk about that for the rental properties.
All right. Alderman Wesley?
It doesn't have to do with an agenda, but could you give us update on the state? Have they sent us IOUs yet.
No.
They've been making their, all right, I'm good then.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
I'd like to call to order the Public Works Committee meeting. I'm going to take note that the same council members are present. And I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of September 10th, 2020, Public Works Committee meeting. That's my motion. Got it? Good? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Report recommendation. Review of the City of Wooddale Engineer Design and Development Standards Manual. Director Lane, want a brief touch on it and go through the whole pages, one page at a time?
I don't know if we'll go through every page, but I know this project needs no introduction to the committee. This has been in the works for some time, but for those in the audience and those listening at home, this is our Engineering Design and Development Standards Manual. It's meant to establish a set of criteria for materials and workmanship on public infrastructure projects. It's going to be made available to contractors and engineers working both for and with the city on public improvement projects. And with that, I will open it up to the committee for any questions. If you could, if you wouldn't mind citing a section number for your questions, it would be appreciated.
No presentation?
No presentation. You've been able to view the document now. It's going to be available to residents on our website and contractors and engineers. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
We'll start with Alderman Woods.
Yeah, thank you. So the first one is page 4. Number 9, contractor has complied with the specifications. That should be complied. No, just a Scribner error.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I will correct that.
You can let somebody else know.
Okay, Alderman Messina.
So I know you mentioned it'll be on our website. So is it just a static PDF or is it something that's searchable?
Thank you, Chairman. It'll just be a PDF on the website.
Have we,
Go ahead.
can we look at some options where it's actually a little bit more interactive, where they could actually do a search within the document? Because I know that's been a complaint that I've seen, and it's not just here, but something where if I'm looking for something, I can actually search within the document versus having to print it or scroll through it. Having it up there as a PDF doesn't do much good other than it's there.
Right.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. It is organized by type of work, for instance, storm sewer, water main, that type of information, but I will look into having a searchable document made available.
Mayor?
Packet page 88 and 89, I had mentioned this, I think to you prior, I don't know if you ever found out. So when we did Royal Oaks, the engineers had spec'd out certain water lines and flanges and connections, and we ended up making a small, it was a small change, but it's still an increase to us. I think, I don't know if it was American or something. We have in stock these flanges from American something or other versus, company B, right? So are we, as we do projects, I think that was taken care of, but since we're going through this, I just want to make sure that whatever we carry in stock for parts, that's what we're putting out on the street. That's all.
Right, absolutely, yeah. There's two types of joints for water mains. There's flange type, which meet together and join mechanically, and then there's the push type. That's standard throughout the industry. That's what's used on all of our current projects. So as far as suppliers go, we do have, certain vendors that we work with, and that's taken into consideration in this document.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is, so company A is what we stock, so, and company B, if we put that out there, now all of a sudden we have to keep more stock and more inventory of other connections or whatever. So that's all, I'm just trying to make sure that that doesn't happen again. I mean, I think it was like 10 or, somewhere between 10 or 20,000 back then, but still, and it was a $4.5 million project. Those things start to add up. Just want to make sure we don't run into that anymore.
Absolutely, and certain manufacturers are specified within our code, for example, hydrants and B-boxes and things like that.
Right, I saw that.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, page 5, number 2, late bids. Bids received after the assigned time will be rejected. Shouldn't that be shall be rejected? Is it absolute? In which case, both those will should be changed to shall.
You're probably right on that. I should have checked with Attorney Pat Bond, but you're
Yeah, you can-
probably correct in that assumption.
I'll pretty much agree with Art anyway.
Probably making about the same as Alderman, than the intern that drafted.
Any other questions out there? Mr. Woods?
Does anybody else have it?
Oh, continue.
Okay, so, on page 6, bidder interested in more than one bid, only one bid can be offered by any one vendor. I was looking at it's almost as if it says that you can bid, so in one place it says you can only bid once, and then the other, after that it says that you can bid for a contractor as a supplier and then bid as a prime contractor yourself. So,
You're looking at number 10 there, correct?
correct.
So I think
Am I
the...
reading it wrong?
The spirit of that, and I'll have to reread the language there and make sure that that's what was intended is what's written. Vendors can supply proposals to multiple general contractors on a project, and also only for that, they can submit a bid only for that portion of work which they're able to supply work for to the city, if the city were to choose them for that portion of the work.
Yeah, and then number 11, failure, lower in the sentence, failure to complete and return these forms may be considered sufficient reason for rejection. And throughout the document, it says that you have to follow all the rules, and if you don't follow the rules, you reject it. And here we chose to use the words may be. Shouldn't that be, should be sufficient reason to reject?
Absolutely, and I think the reason for the maybe is if the city chose to ignore them not submitting those certificates as part of their bid and chose to go with that contractor, that would leave us that option.
Right, so, and that's okay, I'm okay with that, except that when you read the other language in the document, it's more emphatic that absolutely you're not gonna get, but then it kind of opens the door, so I'd rather not, just looking to be more consistent throughout the document,
Okay.
that's all, so just look at some of those.
And I'm not an expert by any means in legal speak. We did have Attorney Bond preview these front-end documents, and he gave them his blessing, so, but I'm willing to certainly speak to him to your point there, Alderman.
Right, yeah, and sometimes, nothing against what he did, is sometimes when you look at it and you look at it from a different angle or a different
Right.
view or cross-analyze the different sections, there tends to be some inconsistency, and I know throughout Wooddale's history, cleaning up a lot of our old stuff, that was always the issue, the inconsistency, and that's the one thing that I think the majority of us up here try to be, is at least consistent. We don't know if we're ever right or wrong, but if we can at least be consistent. So most of my things really are directed towards that, and I can go offline to, there's like 50 other little things we don't need to go over those. They're just, you know, quite a few Scribner errors and word choices, so.
Alderman
If
Jacob?
everybody else has any questions?
One of my big things would be on page, oh, and I can't see the page number, 162. So in the past 2 terms, I've seen a couple construction projects. One down Montrose and Cedar, where I basically needed a police escort down the streets because there was so much rocks in the topsoil, it wasn't even funny. There was dead grass everywhere. It just looked, we had, at that time, the other alderman and I had complaints by the day, by the hour. And now we did Hiawatha, and I had complaints over there, and I personally looked at that topsoil, and it says 1-inch diameter. Well, I mean, I could have went rock picking and picked out several rocks that were much bigger than 1 inch. So we definitely need to address the topsoil somehow for the future. Page 162. 162, grading, topsoil. I mean, maybe that's not the right topsoil I'm talking about, but like I said, it was really bad on Montrose and Cedar when that happened, and we had tons of complaints. And then on Hiawatha, there was a couple complaints, but I went out there personally and looked, and to me, it was, if I was a resident, I would not have been happy if somebody would have put topsoil on my grass like that.
Right.
So,
Go ahead.
And that is an issue that we've run into several times in the past, and we have requested load tickets from the contractor to prove that their topsoil that they've supplied has met the spec. But it is something that we are concerned with, and we had in the past adhered to the IDOT spec, but the purpose of this was to actually be a little more stringent. So hopefully, going forward from here on out, we can put a better standard out there for our topsoil.
Go ahead. Follow up.
is this a little more stringent than what we had in the past, I hope?
I believe it is. It's equivalent to the IDOT spec, but I think with the language there, it might be slightly more stringent. So I will verify that for you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would just like to make sure that it definitely is more stringent, or we would, I mean, personally, I think we would need to change it. And then the same thing with the grass. I mean, I remember when they did Montrose, you could drive down Montrose, and the grass was basically dead all the way down, and our attorney at the time, Pat Bond, kept saying the same thing. You can't do anything till next year. If the grass is dead, they'll have to replace it. Well, when a resident's calling, they put dead grass on their lawn or dead sod, and I had to explain to them, well, if it doesn't come back by next year, we'll replace it. That just does not make any sense to me. Nor is it, nor is that right.
Alderman Messina, go ahead.
And so just to add to this, I think just the net of that is the amount of time we spend with staff, because we ultimately get those complaints. So the time to get on the phone with us, to meet you out there, to do the back and forth, you might as well have just put in the right topsoil. And we would all save time and save staff time and money for the taxpayers. So we can revisit it. I don't think the purpose of this is to actually
Right.
delve into that specific section, but duly noted.
Mayor?
No, actually, if we're gonna request better topsoil, now's the time. This is the standards, right? So we're gonna make that change.
Okay,
Right, correct.
okay. I was
Right
under
now.
the other impression, but okay, sure. Let's
Follow up. Go ahead, Peter.
One more thing, and I guess I'd ask the mayor on this one. When they did Montrose and Cedar, did we actually put sod down, didn't we? Because we weren't just watering grass. I mean, it was dead sod that they put down. And I know we normally put seed down, but
That was,
was that something special we did back then? I can't remember why we put sod, because don't we normally put seed?
We've used, both sod and hydro seed and seed and blanket. It's really project specific. That's why we have specs written for all of them, just in case we decide to use any of them. We've had varying success with all methods. That's why we have warranties. That's why we have maintenance bonds. So those things can be guaranteed.
Alderman Sismarski.
Yeah, I mean, none of us have Mother Nature in the pocket. Things happen, and that's why we have guarantees and warranties on sod, dirt, whatever, what have you. I mean, it happens. It's not a guarantee that every town and every nation in this country gets pure dirt or earth or sod or sunshine or rain. So, I mean, you guys are asking for like the ultimate end-all, be-all. It's got to be the perfect thing. It doesn't happen.
Mayor?
yeah, no, we've had some instances where basically, if they gotta put in 10 inches of dirt underneath the sod, we've had a couple instances where there was a lot of stone and stuff in there. Now, it's one thing if you're doing that for 6 inches and then the top 2 inches are fine dirt. We've had a couple instances where the contractors, let's face it, they saved a little money and they cheated on the top. And that's one thing, you put it on the bottoms, but on the top, at least 1.5 inches to 2 inches of good dirt before you lay the sod. But that should be the standard.
Oh, go ahead.
I 100% agree with you, and to Alderman Susmarski's point, I mean, pulverized black topsoil varies load to load, even from the same supplier. So sometimes it's a mixed bag, sometimes it is the contractor cutting corners. We've encountered both, but
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, and since we're on this, and it's been an issue throughout all the wards on almost all the projects, it's an underlying theme on every one of them. What is the specification in the book now for talking about sod, not the seed? Are we 2 inches of topsoil, 3 inches of topsoil?
I mean, it's 4 inches topsoil for sod.
Okay, so if I can follow, so then if it's 4 inches of topsoil with sod, is the sod part of the 4 inches?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so, because I know in the past it's been counted, because there's like an inch of dirt with the sod, and that's how we massage the number. I won't use the other
Right.
word. Right, so that's where the opinions come in. So I think what everybody up here is saying is that we need to be a little more specific, that it's 4 inches of topsoil, and that the sod doesn't count, and that it's got to be free and clean. I mean, there's different, you can get clean pulverized dirt. I mean, there's just different grades of the dirt also. So to the mayor's point, if you're filling 10 inches, you don't want to put all topsoil or fresh pulverized dirt, because that thing's just going to be a pile of mud. So there is a need to have some other soil underneath. I think looking at it, if we can address those in there with that thought process in mind, that's been the complaint throughout every ward, every street project that we've had where we've done Parkway. That's a consistent theme. So to Alderman Messina's point, maybe we could cut this off, and if it means adding an extra inch of dirt or determining what that inch of dirt really is, right? As we see them fill parkways, we know that the existing grade tends to undulate a little bit, so 4 inches isn't 4 inches, it's 4 inches in one spot, 2 inches in another spot. And I don't want to get crazy where we go out with micrometers to check, but maybe that we look at that a little more closely in the future, and to address it so that we don't have the ongoing battle every year with the same thing. And it has been consistent on every project, I think.
Mayor?
Yeah. The other thing, so with the seed, that's usually done when we're doing like a water main break or something. We don't sod, but when we're doing projects, that's when we sod or hydro seed. That was the difference. That's the only thing I was gonna say.
Except for Dalewood.
Any other questions? Alderman Westlake, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what needs to change is that this hydro seeding doesn't work. It doesn't work. 'Cause like I'm going to say, if we were on our Wood Street, that still looks terrible.
Go ahead.
I understand we've had issues out on Dalewood. I think that might have been more the time of the year that we placed the hydro seed. If you can go back in the ComEd right-of-way off of Gilbert Drive, it looks like a fairway out there from the hydro seed that was placed a few weeks ago. I mean, it came in absolutely beautifully. So like I said, we've had varying degrees of success with sod, with seed, with hydro seed. It's just kind of all a matter of, when you put it down, how you prepare it, and how you take care of it after the fact, so.
And that's what we need to address then, depending on the season,
Right.
correct? So,
Absolutely.
Alderman Woods, and then, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna exactly piggyback on what you said, is that's exactly what we're talking about. So all those applications, all work done correctly. It's like any other product. If you do it correctly, the problem is that it wasn't done correctly or the timing was bad. The timing's bad, it's done incorrectly. And yet the project moved forward. So what steps do we need in the future to take so that isn't the case? Because the grass still is terrible. They've been back a couple times. I don't know what the answer is right now. I'm just saying this is something that we don't want to continue to do.
Maybe we can put it in the contract. Mayor, go ahead. No.
If we're done talking about grass and seeding, Can we go to the next item, or?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, item page 166. So, we're talking about curb and gutter. When we replace curbs, especially by driveways or whatnot, I know I get a lot of complaints. Well, my driveway's now higher than it used to be, and my car bounces.
Right.
Is there anything, I've asked, can we just do more of a depressed curb at the driveways, so we don't get those calls anymore? Because I can tell you, every year I get those calls.
Go ahead.
Yeah, typically, when we're replacing curb on a road project, for instance, we replace in kind with what's there. We can certainly treat that on a case-by-case basis and replace, driveway approaches with depressed curb.
See,
Mayor?
but the question becomes, even though we're saying we're replacing in kind, they're telling me that the curbs are higher by the driveway, now their car is bouncing as they're coming up into their driveway. If we're gonna in kind, I would in kind a little lower instead of a little higher. So,
And of course, we'd be saving money if we, instead of putting a mountable curb, we put more of a depressed, like the mayor says, we'd be saving money, no?
It's likely that their curb previously had deteriorated significantly over time, so now obviously it's in better condition. They're noticing the height of it more. But if we wanted to, look into replacing the raised curbs at driveway entrances, it's something that we could do. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the engineering design standards. This is for, all types of projects. It's not limiting us to any one for any certain instance.
and I'm not
Go
sure
ahead.
if everybody's getting those comments, but if they are, we should be lowering them somewhat. I understand that if it's too low, then the water's flowing into the driveway. And some of the driveways, if it's tilted towards the house, now the water's going towards the house. Of course, we don't want to do that. That's happened in a couple areas as well, actually, one house specific.
Alderman Woods?
I was kind of going to touch on all four of those things. So in replacing them, to Director Lang's point, a lot of these things have sunk or
Right.
sidewalks include it, and you're left with X amount of set points that you have to hit, and then have the water drain back so it doesn't drain back into the house. So just so everybody knows, we can't always eliminate that little bump from what it used to be. Otherwise, we create more problems that you address. That's all, just so that the public knows.
Alderman
You can refer
Sismarski?
to this tape.
But just so you know, there were things taken 10 years prior to this council, which were wrong on streets that, in Ward 4, the mayor knows exactly what I'm talking about, certain streets. They were built the wrong way, and they tilt back towards the house. So they get flooded all the time. There's no way to fix it now. The damage is done. But according to, not according to, but Alderman Catalano is save money on the tilt. There's no saving money on whether or not the bump's leveler or higher. It's the same amount of concrete. I don't want to argue with that, but Ward 4 is particularly one ward you need to look at to see what the previous councils have done to that town. I get rear yard flooding, I get front yard flooding all the time on numerous streets. Not like Ward 3, or Ward 2 and Ward 3, but, it's something to look at. And you being the new public works director, that's not your fault, but it's something for you to look at and grow with. And I appreciate your time.
Alderman Jacob?
Do we give, when we do that, and I don't remember, do we give people because I do remember like when they did Royal Oaks, a lot of people didn't want the curb. So are we
Sidewalks either.
allowed to, if a resident says they don't want a curb anymore, just put a slope there instead? Are we allowed to do that, or?
You're talking about in front of their driveway?
Yeah, when you're pulling into the driveway.
Yeah, it's something that we look at on a case-by-case basis. Depending on the quantity of homes, I don't know if we would go door to door asking everybody what type of curb they want in front of their house if we were redoing the street. But if we do get a request, we review it on a case-by-case basis.
And that would definitely save the city money if you're not putting a curb in at all.
Well, you still gotta put something.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we replace curb if it's cracked or deteriorating, so I mean, we're not gonna just leave decaying curb in the road because
Yeah.
people don't wanna be inconvenienced for their driveways for a few days, but if you're saying that they would prefer to have a depressed curb in front of their driveway, it's certainly something that we can take on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
and that's also, if we're replacing the apron, that's a different story. If we're not replacing the apron, there's nothing that we can do. Mr. Wesky?
So in all that we're talking about, that isn't there, if we use the NFT funds, there's a state standard that we have to build that road. That, right?
Correct, yes, we have to
So
adhere
there
to
are
IDOT
state
standards.
standards with the curbs and everything else that we have to follow.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Sismarski?
Along with Alderman Wesley's agreement, I'm agreeing with him, but at the same time, the ROW is the ROW, it's the right of way of the city. If it is what it is, and the state says this is how you build it, that's how you build it. You cannot deviate, correct?
Correct.
Mayor?
Well, technically, we can improve, we just can't diminish. Right? If we want to make it a little better, then there's.
Correct, yeah, if we're
So-
talking specifically about state roads or using MFT funds aren't as stringent as when you're using federal funds or working on a federal road, but there are things we can do within reason.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, going to page 169, subgrades and whatnot. I know I saw it in one of these pages. We do some kind of compaction testing. I think it was page 202. But on page 169, we talk about subgrades, we do soil borings.
What section?
Back at page 169. So, do we do compaction testing on all our roads? I mean, they used to be like some kind of, what is it called, a perk test or something?
A proof roll, yeah.
And, had to be at 92 or 95%. Is that still our standard, or is that no longer the standard?
I
Because
believe it is, I don't have the exact figure for you, but I can definitely get that. I thought it was in that table at the end of that section, but perhaps not.
I think
But we
page-
do have certain compaction standards for the subgrade of the road and the parkway in general.
So page 202 talks about the subgrade shall be free from unsuitable material and shall be compacted to a minimum of 95% of
Mhm.
modified Proctor density.
Right.
So, I mean, but then on this page, and maybe, because it's an embankment.
Yeah, roadway subgrades have different standards than embankment or, parkway. There's certain compaction requirements, for instance, on Dalewood, when they were laying the sewer, there's certain compaction requirements for that trench also before they can put concrete on top of it.
Okay, I just want to make sure as far as standards, because I think it was my first year on the council, I think Montclair was done, okay? And so I was new, I really didn't know what was going on because it was just done before I got elected. And we were already talking about having problems with that street, it was just laid. And I think we had a little issue in some areas in Royal Oaks, where we had to do a couple of patches. So I just want to make sure, when these streets are being built, that, that we are testing these, because I know on some of the pipes, we test one spot every 500 feet or some crazy number.
Right, and we do soil boring and pavement cores during the design phase, which, leads to the development of the profile of the street to make sure that it's adequate.
And my only concern is, like Royal Oaks had a few patches, I know Montclair, we need to make sure the compaction is done properly, the right amount of stone, the right amount of concrete or asphalt, and I know it gets into that over here, we spend $4 million or $2 million or $1 million, the road should be lasting, we shouldn't be having a problem the following summer. That's all I'm talking.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah.
Can you speak to how we do the compaction test? How do we determine that it's at 92 or 91 or 95?
You know, there's, that's usually quality control on the part of the contractor, and it's usually a third-party group that does that. I don't know the specifics into how they calculate those measurements. I could look into getting some more details for you on that.
If you could, and then on the same category, but as we're on these projects and you're going down 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet, especially the deeper you go, that fill, that gravel, stone, whatever is supposed to be put in different lifts, how are we monitoring that? And then is each lift being compacted?
Yes, it's, I believe, typically, I know it changes depending on the depth of the trench, but typically it's 12-inch or 10-inch lifts, and then it's compacted by machine. Sometimes it's jetted with a jetter. That's all part of the construction oversight process, and the resident engineer's field notes would have those.
So, and is that spelled out in our new manual that they're following?
You know what, I don't recall offhand if the compaction lift is included in here,
And-
but perhaps maybe it should be. Let me look into that, talk to our
And so the
engineer about
reason
that.
I bring it up is because I think another thing that's been a consistent theme or thread across all the projects and listening to the engineers when something happens and we complain is that while we have no control over means and methods, well, if the rules say that you can only put lifts of 12 inches and that has to be compacted, A, then we need to follow it, and B, who's watching and who's judging if it got compacted?
Right.
Is that happening? So if it's not written or annotated in this specification, it's probably not likely to get done. And given the fact that a lot of these projects were going pretty deep, I mean, the storm sewer one they're doing, those guys are actually compacting, right? I mean, they got the huge compactor out there, which is kind of what brought it to my attention more. Wanted to bring it up before, but I think that needs to be addressed, because that's another issue, and that speaks directly to what the mayor was talking about the projects failing.
Right, and I'm not sure if there is an industry standard on that, which is why it may not be included in here, and it may vary, based on the fill material, but let me get some more information on that, and we'll look to include it if relevant.
And my understanding, being in a similar business, is that there is, I'm held to that standard, so when I watch things and go, how can they fill 20 feet of trench and then move on without any compaction? It'll take like forever to get that.
Right.
So,
Alderman
Thank
Jacob. Oh, you're welcome. Alderman Jacob?
Yeah, now these standards, I mean, these are our minimum standards, correct?
Correct,
So,
yeah,
I
they
mean,
could be exceeded.
Okay,
yes.
so they can be exceeded. We have verbiage in there that states that, so we don't have somebody say, well, you guys can't do that, because
No,
this is what's in, online, and this is what we bid on, so we could change that any time, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. We have the authority to change this, to suit our needs or, as practices change in the industry. But these are the minimum standards that are required to be met by our contractors and engineers.
Go ahead.
Does that have to come back to council every time, or is that something that Public Works or you could make a decision on, or they have to come back to council? That we have
There
to
are
change
certain
something?
allowances written within this document that allow the city staff and engineer to, change allowable materials for a certain project. But any changes to this document itself, once it's adopted by the council, will be brought back to you for approval.
Any other questions? Mayor?
Page 179, luminaries, residential luminary. I know this ain't the time to discuss this one, but I know we've talked about putting up street lights on streets that do not have lights. Maybe next time we do strategic planning, as we do roads, maybe we should start putting in 3 or 4 lights per block or something, just to light some of those streets up. Because to tackle that project on its own will never happen, or may never happen, I should say. So that's something maybe we should talk about. And I got another one.
Go ahead.
So, page 200, minimum 48 hours notice. So, this is about stopping, starting work and all this. So we had an issue already, we know about it, the contractor left for a few weeks. So is that something gonna happen now, that, are we gonna put something in here that projects need to be moving forward and they can't walk away for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or something?
There are provisions in every contract that the contractor can't leave the site unattended, with debris laying about and, any hazards present. We'd have to talk to Attorney Bond to see what authority the city has to require a contractor to be on site and working if they still aren't beyond the completion date.
Make a note that Mike Samarski left at 8:33, or is he coming back? Okay. Go ahead.
Right, I just want to make sure, I think the project I'm talking about, I think he was going for almost 6 weeks. I mean, we want to keep them on schedule, number one, and if they finish ahead of schedule, that's great. But 6 weeks in the street still, everybody up here is going to start getting complaints. So is there something we can put into these codes and these guidelines that'll take care of that?
Go ahead, City Manager.
I would hesitate to say that we would be able to do that in the engineering standards. I believe Attorney Bond would say that we don't have the authority to mandate that. We only have the authority to mandate the completion date. The project you're talking about coincidentally is on the council agenda for next week, and our remedy is that of liquidated damages, which would be discussed next week. So it's funny you mentioned that, since it is forthcoming very soon.
Alderman Woods.
So I agree with the majority of what you said, that can't be in here, but one of the other things in reading through this in different places, it says one thing, other places it says something. It talks about the owner, that being the city, can void or null a contract, but it doesn't have any language for a time frame or sending notice. So it says we can do it, but there's no parameters in there. Not 100% they should be, but it seems like there should be something within 5 days' notice, and you have, all engineering contracts or AIA documents all have that in there. It seems to me that kind of standard language could be here. So that's a question for Mr. Bond, obviously. But it seems like if we're going to write in here that we have that ability, that there should be some language of when that ability is used and to what length that ability exists.
We did broach that topic with Attorney Bond a couple of times over the last few years, and I know we had made some progress in standardized construction contract templates, a little bit different than the engineering standards, like the road specs, things we're talking about tonight. But I can ask him if we could incorporate some of that language in here, but we have made some modifications to our templates to include some of the things you're talking about to make them more standardized.
Any more or any other questions? Mayor?
I think I'm done.
You're done.
Wow.
Alderman Woods? You good?
Yeah, unless you want to go over word choices for another 2 hours.
Oh, sure.
Okay, page 8, general guarantee. Contractors agree to save the city. And when you complete that, instead of save, it should be hold the city of Wooddale and its agents, employees harmless.
Can't you take that offline?
I can continue, but I
Right.
don't want to bore it. No.
Take that offline.
We all have better things to do.
Okay, so any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'll make a motion to adopt the Engineer Design and Development Standards Manual with changes, with the corrections. Then that is my motion.
Second.
Okay,
Second was by Sonny.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And next items to consider at future meetings. First is the wind sculptures lighting in October. And then we have a vehicle purchase in November. And Veterans Memorial Landscaping coming up in fall. And also, we have the 50/50 apron program cost share, November or December. Any other items to consider? If there are none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say
Aye.
we're adjourned. Thank you.
Peter, Ed's not here, so.
What?
Come over here when you're done.
Nothing for you.